of threads as having books, fabric, ties, belts. When my mother would go over from the Nearly New shop and bring her a bunch of ties, she would tell me that every one of those ties was a story and a book that she could write. And I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's true. Now, Elijah Pierce, this is, again, Aminah speaking. He was a barber and a wood carver. He grew up with wood. He loved wood. No matter what he was going to do, no matter how things were changing, he never left the wood. His feelings to the wood were the same, never changed. She's talking about books. She's talking about her art. Aminah really only talked about one thing, ever, and that was her art, her books, her making. In the 3 hours that she slept a day, she dreamed probably about those books. And those of you that knew Elijah Pierce, or those of you who've spent time here at the Museum Among the Possessions, know that if you visited his shop, it was an entire realm of a single-minded vision of what the world and what the purpose of your place in the world was about. It was just making. We were just here to make work. This is Aminah talking. I'm working on 50 different projects. When I come in, I know exactly what to do. I don't select, it's selected for me. If I stop to analyze it, I wouldn't know which way. I've always had this clarity. Life is full of interruptions. I deal with interruptions, and I come back and do my work. Okay, so you can imagine that when I tried to get Aminah to do a real book, because she was always saying, you do real books. You do trying to get her to, that's an interruption. I mean, really, it was an interruption to her creative process. And it was not completely willingly that I wrestled her into the arena of Elijah's Angel. Just a couple more things. Going to Aminah's house was very much like being in Elijah's studio. Books inside of books, music boxes in books, books sewn to the sleeves of puppets, to the curved wooden body of a mystical snake, to the arms of a chair that is evolving from a root given to Aminah by her father. I'm working on a book dress. Aminah describes this work in progress. It's covered with hundreds of books, music boxes, and puppets in them, pictures and objects all sewn to the dress. It's going to be called my Poindexter dress. It's a wearable book form. I just have to put it on, and I'm ready to show the stories. You can sort of see that the texture of what she did was so infused with her sense of memory and place and people, the characters of her neighborhood, her parents' neighborhood, the neighborhoods she visited, that we, in some ways, have a very shallow idea of what we see when we look at her work of Aminah's. I remember going in front of a Raganon piece where she had the faces of the people all stuffed. They were like pillows, little pillow heads. And I said, Aminah, what are, I've never seen that. That's new. When did you start doing that? Oh, well, I wanted to put the books inside each person. And, just being a literal person, I said, you mean like a book, like you wrote a little book about the person and then put it inside? Yes. A little book this big? Yes. No, really, there must be 100 of these things. There's a little book. Michael! She was like, so when I first met Aminah, she brought out the work of Miriam Shapiro. You might know her work, might not know her work. She did, curiously, an accordion book. She worked in quilts. She worked in fabrics. She worked in collages. You might see something. Aminah was influenced by so many things. This is just one real book that she said, I want my work to look like this. I want it to be in a book. So one day I went over, I had finished a story called Elijah's Angel, a story for Hanukkah and Christmas. And I'd only published one other children's book at the time. And I said, I would like to try to sell this book with you as the illustrator. That's not really how this works in this world. You don't really do that. Most of the time, the publisher finds the illustrator. And I handed her the story, and she started crying. And we hugged, and I was like, yes, of course, this is the right thing. We want to do it. Let's try. We'll work really hard. It'll be hard. And she came into the other room, and this isn't quite life-size. It's this big. And she comes out with a painting that's wet. There's literally wet paint on it. And she said, this is what I was doing when you came to the door. I just painted this. And it's, again, you can't see it here very well, but this is every Day is a page in your book of life. Aminah once talking about one of Elijah's recurring themes. So hence began our first attempt to try to get a work of Aminah's into print. So these were just a couple little studies that she did because I didn't go over all the texts, but as part of Mimi's interview with Aminah, she talks about how she has to research everything, even if she's drawing something that she knows. It has to have this sense of a momentum of history and writing. So she would write up what she was going to do and send me letters about it. So this is the actual angel that the book is based on, that is by Elijah Pierce. And I gave it to Aminah to draw from, along with a few other pieces of mine. This is a letter that she'd sent me from New York when she was working on some other printing. We always, would share. I had 3 dogs. She had 2 dogs. I would bring my 2 dogs. She had 1 dog. Whatever. We always had dogs in our. Now, since I'm going to assume, I don't have time to read the story or tell much about it, but I just thought it would be interesting for you to see some of the extra things that Aminah shared when doing this. This is my copy in which she sort of drew a little extra thank you drawing in it. There's the angel as Aminah drew it. There's some pretty funny things that I think you might find. These are some of the carvings that are here at the Columbus Museum that Aminah, of course, researched. So here's one of her first sketches. We had to turn in a set of sketches to Harcourt. And this is my handwriting here. Elijah's face, joyous, happier. Let's see here, a couple more sketches. There's the Noah's Ark from which she did her drawing. Here's Elijah turning the book of wood with young Michael. Again, my very studious, make him happier, less mean. Again, another piece of Elijah's, and then how Aminah rendered it for the book itself. Yeah, give him a good day. This was part of the challenge, helping Aminah see some of these things through. There's that piece then, and then here's how she went from the sketch that was approved then. And it was, again, not to discredit Aminah one jot. This was a totally different way of working for an art director to send her a piece of paper and say, you can't touch the border. You have to leave us a margin. And here she's working on cloth that is super saturated with house paint and Dr. Martin's dyes and trying to make it accommodate the printer's demands. Yeah, unfortunately, so this is just an excerpt of this one because it moves, but I can't do it with PowerPoint here. So there's the sketch that was from. And then the last piece there. So this book won the National Jewish Book Award, and there was a presentation in New York, and Aminah and I went. And before the presentation, I went over to her house, and she had made a beautiful vest for herself. I hope that's found among her many possessions that she's donated here. And it was just beautiful. It was crusted, and it said, it had some Elijah's angels and threaded and some books on it. And I said, wow, Aminah, wow, that's just amazing. I'll just, I'm going to look like your escort, coming up there. I'll be so, underdressed. So when I got to New York, and we got backstage, she reached into her purse, which was also, an amazing threaded, beaded dress, and she pulled out a necktie. So this is my necktie. This is a music box. Right here is the key. And then it has a book on it, and whoops. That's all right. And it has, so it isn't a finished book. It says, Jewish Book Award, my name, New York. And then at the bottom of it, there's a pen holder with a pen in it so that I could inscribe books and things like that. Yeah, so my heart's still pounding from the little escape there. I then invited Aminah to be a part of a book to benefit Share Our Strength's fight to end childhood hunger. And this first book had an amazing array of people, most of whom were Caldecott winners or Newbery winners, just amazing groups, and Mimi Chenfeld. And I commissioned Mina to do a piece of Mim's. So this is her work that illustrates a story by Mim. Later, we did a book about dogs to benefit a fund that I started to raise money for indigent animals and rescue cats and dogs. And Aminah did a piece about her wonderful Duchess and the puppies that Duchess had. So she was luckily among really stellar people. Her first book on her own, meaning without me bothering her, was a book by an Australian author named Mem Fox. This is a story of a young woman who's kind of coming to grips with the loss of her elders. She drew a couple pieces as studies for me, just that I cherish, just in colored pencils here, handwritten. Actually, what's kind of funny is, it's not in this one, it's in another one. She drew a study for another book in Sophie, and the parents are reading a book to the kids, and the book that they happen to be reading is Elijah's Angel, which, no, Aminah, you can't have. She also contributed to another book for Share Our Strength called Down to Earth, and did a picture of her bottle garden. Those of you that have been to her house know that she plants upside-down bottles along with the flowers, and they catch weeds, they catch sunlight, they are colorful, and traditionally bottle gardens go the other way around, so when the wind goes across the mouths, they make a sound and scare away the things you don't want, I guess. But this was Aminah's beautiful version. Another book that she did was To Be a Drum, and there may be others. I just knew I didn't have time to tell you all. She did not do The Greatest Table, another book that I did for Share Our Strength, but she so loved this book that opened up into a 12-foot accordion that she went to her publisher. We wrote a strong letter to our mutual editor, and that's when she had the chance to do A Street Called Home, her own accordion book of her own street that included flaps and all kinds of extras that really made much, much more of a, much closer an example for someone reading a commercial book to know what the texture of a real work of Aminah's, might involve. After that was published, we knew we wanted to do another book, and Aminah gave me this piece of paper one day and said, "Look, I've had this in my scrapbook of just things that I might think about," and it was the story of Gussie West, a young slave who escaped to Ohio repeatedly. In a kind of a scam with a young white proto-abolitionist, where he would sell him into slavery, take the money, and then he would hide in a sort of odd little contraption leaving, and Gussie West would hide in this wagon and escape. So he did this 33 times. And so that true story, that remarkable story, is one that Aminah gave me to write for her. The extraordinary thing was, of course, a young white Jewish boy in Columbus going to write a slave narrative about Gussie West. So I read many of the WPA remarkable oral histories, and Aminah and I sat and worked on what we wanted in the story, and I told myself that I could write this as long as I didn't invent anything, that if I just found things that were true and laced them together in a singular narrative, I wasn't going to tell the story of slavery. I was going to tell the story of Gussie West, which I renamed simply so that anything that I got wrong or anything that I threaded wrong, I'm not saying it's a true story about that man, but a true story based on that. And Aminah illustrated this, and again, for the second time, she won a very distinguished award for this. The Simon Wiesenthal gave it the inaugural Once Upon a book. It's a really long title. from the Museum of Tolerance. Last 2 years ago, I adapted the story that I wrote with Aminah, Elijah's Angel, as a play that the Jewish Center put on. I just want to say that, because I promised I would only do 20 minutes, that Aminah had one other thought in her life besides, I want to make books. I want to make real books. And as I say, the interpretation of the word book is so broad and so rich in her life. The other thing that she wanted was her work to be cared for forever. She agonized over, where will her work go? What will her work be? Even in her 40s, even in her 50s, in her 60s, who will take care of it? Who will sell her work? Who will provide? Because for many years, she lacked for most things other than her art. She got by. And many of us helped her move work. Finally, the Hammond Harkins people, of course. And then the museum came forward, and one after another show, so that today, as part of this celebration, I know that every possible thing Aminah could have wanted came true. I mean, her work is here, just where it should be.
So much, Michael.
Sure.
I would love for,
Is this still, Steve, am I still doing? Okay, great. Yeah, it's funny. When I would go to schools and kids would point to the pictures where the hands would be so enormous, why are the hands so big? Why are the hands so big? And Aminah would say, it's because they're important. We talked about it all the time. In fact, we had to have the conversation like, Aminah, could you make him just a little smaller in this picture? Because whatever I love is big. I mean, that is an outsider artist. That's what a folk artist, I think, whatever they're paying attention to, gets larger. And she would say a woodcarver's hands are so important. Well, on the other hand, the parents' hands are very big but they are to me Aminah's reach, Aminah's enfolding, Aminah's sense of possessing all of us. Yeah, please. Yes. I believe so, yes.
I'll talk about them a little bit. I'll talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, she had a wonderful gallery. The Carl Solway Gallery was one of the first galleries that really helped at least get her some kind of an ongoing place to sell her work.